Racist police harasses black Navy officer in public. And he pays a heavy price for his actions. Welcome back to Meaningful Stories. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and start the story right now. The late afternoon sun bled across Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a molten gold blaze sinking low, clawing at the horizon as if reluctant to let the day die. Shadows stretched long and jagged over the cracked sidewalks, like dark fingers reaching for something lost. Lieutenant Amani Harper moved through the streets, her boots striking the pavement with a rhythm that whispered danger, steady, deliberate, a predator's cadence. She wasn't just walking, she was stalking the ghosts of her past. A quiet storm wrapped in a plain t-shirt, cargo pants, and sneakers scuffed from battles most couldn't imagine. Her duffel bag swung heavy over one shoulder, a silent witness to years of war, its weight pulling at her squared shoulders like the pull of a buried memory. 7 years. That's how long it had been since she'd last set foot here, not since she'd traded these streets for blood-soaked sand. Not since she'd shoveled dirt over her mother's casket under a sky too gray to care. Now, at 40, she was back, and the neighborhood stared at her like a stranger wearing a familiar face. The convenience store on the corner still hawked its 2-for-1 sodas, its neon sign flickering like a dying pulse. The barbershop's faded letters sagged under time's relentless grip, and the basketball court thrummed with the frantic energy of kids slamming rubber against concrete, their shouts slicing through the humid air. The scent of fried catfish curled out from old Miss Laverne's joint, thick and intoxicating, wrapping around Amani like a rope tugging her back into a life she'd buried deep. Her dark brown eyes swept the block, sharp, unyielding, the kind of gaze that could spot a sniper in a sandstorm or a lie in a heartbeat. She wasn't in uniform, but it didn't matter. The military clung to her like a second skin, shoulders back, chin level, every step a quiet declaration of who she was. Her father had called it warrior posture, a term that echoed in her skull now, tugging a faint, bittersweet smile to her lips. He'd be proud, she thought, if he hadn't joined her mother beneath the earth. Then, movement, quick, electric. A cluster of teenage boys loitered outside the corner store, their laughter cutting through the haze like a blade. One of them, maybe 16, all wiry limbs and restless energy, caught her eye. He froze mid-sentence, head snapping up as if she'd pulled a trigger. His double take was fast, instinctive, and then he nodded, a sharp, respectful dip of his chin. "You military?" His voice cracked the stillness, bold but curious, slicing through the chatter of his crew. Amani stopped, her gaze locking onto his, a flicker of something raw passing between them. "Something like that," she said, her tone low, steady, a coiled spring waiting to snap. He grinned, a flash of teeth against the fading light. "Figured, my cousin's in the army, he walks like you." Before she could answer, his friends yanked him back into their orbit, a shout dragging him inside the store. The door banged shut, and the moment shattered. Amani exhaled, a slow hiss of breath escaping her lips. That kid, he was why she'd fought, why she'd waded through the chaos of Kandahar, Fallujah, Mogadishu. Years of leading teams through midnight ambushes, of choking on sandstorms that devoured sound and sight, of staring death down until it blinked first. She'd spent her 20s in war zones, her 30s clawing through the wreckage they'd left in her soul. Now, here she was, 40 and adrift, walking streets that felt like a dream she'd half forgotten, familiar, yet foreign, a puzzle with missing pieces. But the air shifted, thickened, something was coming. She could feel it, the prickle on her neck, the hum of instinct honed by a decade of survival. Her hand tightened on the duffel strap, her pulse steady but alert. This wasn't just a homecoming. This was a reckoning. The air grew heavy, a suffocating shroud settling over the cracked streets of Baton Rouge as Amani Harper pressed forward, her boots carving a steady rhythm into the pavement. The golden light of dusk was fading fast, bleeding into a bruised purple that clung to the edges of the horizon. She adjusted the duffel bag slung over her shoulder, its weight a familiar anchor, when a low growl pierced the stillness. A patrol car, creeping up beside her like a beast stalking prey. Its tires crunched against the asphalt, deliberate and slow, out of sync with the usual reckless speed of cops tearing through this neighborhood. Amani didn't flinch, didn't break stride, but her senses snapped to life, every nerve alight, Every instinct screaming, she kept walking, eyes forward, pretending not to notice, though she knew the game was already in motion. The window rolled down with a hiss, and a voice, gravelly, thick with menace, slithered out. "Excuse me, miss." She stopped, pivoting just enough to face him. And there he was, Officer Derek Simmons. Mid-40s, crew cut, his thick arms straining against his uniform, a smirk curling his lips like a predator savoring the hunt. Mirrored sunglasses hid his eyes, but she could feel them, cold, probing, raking over her like she was a trespasser in her own skin. "Mind telling me what you're doing around here?" His words dripped with authority, each syllable a challenge disguised as a question. Amani met his stare, her dark brown eyes unyielding, a fortress of calm amidst the brewing storm. She'd faced men like him before, petty tyrants who saw her confidence, her blackness, her refusal to shrink, and took it as an insult to their fragile dominion. She shifted the duffel strap, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Just walking." His smirk twitched, faltering for a split second. "Where to?" he pressed, leaning closer, his breath fogging the edge of the window. She arched a brow, her tone laced with quiet defiance. "Didn't realize I needed an itinerary to walk my own street." Simmons didn't like that. His jaw tightened, a muscle twitching beneath the surface, and the air crackled with unspoken hostility. "We've had some break-ins around here," he said, his voice hardening, a flimsy excuse pulled from thin air. "Gotta make sure everything's in order." Amani held his gaze, unflinching, her silence a weapon sharper than words. "You see me breaking into something?" she asked, her calm a dare, a spark tossed into dry tinder. His smirk vanished, replaced by a scowl that twisted his face into something uglier. He leaned out further, exhaling sharply through his nose. "Just doing my job." She fought the urge to roll her eyes, her patience thinning like a fraying thread. "Well, I'm just walking." The words landed like a gauntlet thrown down, and she could feel the shift, the moment tilting, teetering on the edge of something volatile. Simmons wasn't here for answers. He was here for control. And something about her, her posture, her poise, the way she refused to bend, was a splinter under his skin. He put the car in park with a jolt, the engine's hum dying into an ominous silence. "Hold on a second," he barked, his voice sharper now, a command wrapped in threat. "Let's see some ID." Amani didn't move, didn't blink. Her training surged to the forefront. Assess the threat, map the exits, read the enemy. Simmons wasn't just a cop, he was a man drunk on his own power. And right now, he was sizing her up like prey he could break. Her pulse stayed steady, but her mind raced, cataloging every detail, his right thumb hovering near his holster, the faint creak of his leather belt, the distant hum of traffic fading into a void. The street held its breath, the tension coiling tighter, a storm brewing in the space between them. Slowly, deliberately, she reached into her pocket, her movements a dance of precision, and pulled out her military ID. She held it up, not handing it over. Not yet, letting it glint in the dying light. Simmons squinted at it, then at her, his smirk creeping back like a venomous snake. "Military, huh?" His tone was a sneer, dripping with disbelief. He snatched the ID from her fingers before she could react, twisting it between his thick hands like a trophy he'd claimed. "Navy SEALs," he read aloud, dragging the words out, mocking them, turning her years of blood and grit into a punchline. "That's cute." A flicker of heat flared in Amani's chest, not anger. Not yet, but a smoldering annoyance she'd felt 100 times before, in rooms full of men who thought her rank was a lie. Her strength a fluke. "Return it," she said, her voice low, firm, a steel edge cutting through his bravado. He tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle he could dismantle. "You know, I've been on the force 20 years. He drawled, his fingers tightening around the card. "Seen all kinds come through this neighborhood. Never met a woman Navy SEAL before. You sure this isn't fake?" The insult was so absurd, so brazen, it almost pulled a laugh from her throat. "Run it through your system." She shot back, her calm a razor's edge. "You'll find out soon enough." But Simmons didn't want truth. He wanted a fight. His lips curled, his eyes glinted with something dark, and the street seemed to shrink around them, the air electric with the promise of chaos. Across the way, a young woman stepped forward. Phone raised. Recording, the first ripple of a tide about to crash. Simmons noticed, his shoulders stiffening, but he didn't back down. He was too deep in his own game now. And Amani knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. The Baton Rouge dusk thickened into a suffocating haze, the last threads of golden light snuffed out by the creeping purple of night. The street pulsed with a restless energy, a heartbeat teetering on the edge of chaos. As Officer Derek Simmons squared off against Amani Harper, his mirrored sunglasses glinted like the eyes of a predator. But beneath them, his control was fraying, his breath sharp, his fingers twitching near his cuffs like a man itching to draw blood. Amani stood motionless, a pillar of steel in the storm, her dark eyes locked on him, unblinking, daring him to make his move. The air crackled, electric with the weight of what was coming. "Turn around," Simmons snarled, his voice a jagged blade slicing through the silence. "Hands behind your back." The command landed like a thunderclap, and the crowd, once just shadows on the periphery, stirred to life. Eyes widened, phones rose like weapons, capturing every second of the showdown. Amani inhaled slow and deep, her pulse a steady drumbeat beneath her calm. She'd faced death in deserts and war zones, stared down rifles and bombs without flinching. But this petty tyrant in a uniform, was a different kind of threat. He wanted her submission, her humiliation, and she'd be damned if he got it. "For what?" she asked, her voice smooth as polished stone, cutting through his bluster. His jaw clenched, teeth grinding audibly. Resisting arrest, he spat, the words a desperate grasp at authority. A scoff erupted from the onlookers, sharp and defiant. "Arrest for what?" a man hollered from the corner store, his voice raw with disbelief. Simmons ignored him, his chest heaving, his pride a wild animal thrashing in a cage. He stepped closer, one step too many, and the air turned to fire. "Simmons," Amani said, her tone low, lethal, a warning wrapped in velvet. "If you put those cuffs on me, you'll regret it." His smirk flickered back, forced and brittle, a mask slipping under pressure. "That a threat?" he growled, his hand dropping to his belt, fingers brushing the cold metal of the cuffs. Her eyes never wavered, piercing through him like a blade. "No," she said, "it's a fact." But Simmons was too far gone, drowning in his own arrogance. His hand shot forward, the cuffs gleaming in the dim light as he lunged for her wrist. Bad move. Time slowed, the world shrinking to the space between them. And Amani moved, fast, fluid, a blur of precision honed by years of combat. Her arm twisted, a subtle shift, breaking his grip before it could lock, her body pivoting in a heartbeat. She didn't strike, didn't need to, just a sidestep, a redirection, and suddenly Simmons was stumbling, his own momentum betraying him. To the crowd, it looked like he'd tripped over thin air, a clumsy fool undone by his own weight. Gasps erupted, sharp and electric. "Damn!" She slipped him like nothing, someone barked, awe threading through the words. The young woman with the phone edged closer, her lens drinking in every frame, a grin tugging at her lips. Simmons' face flushed crimson, a volcanic rage boiling beneath his skin as he caught himself, his breath ragged, his pride shredded in front of a growing sea of eyes. Across the street, a man folded his arms, shaking his head with a low chuckle. A couple by the food truck froze, forks hovering midair, their meal forgotten. The street was no longer just a backdrop, it was a coliseum. And Simmons was losing. "That's assault, Harper," he roared, his voice cracking with desperation, clinging to the last scraps of his power. Amani barely blinked, her stance unshaken, a statue carved from resolve. "No," she said, her words a quiet thunder. "It's called avoiding unnecessary contact." His eyes blazed, wild and unhinged, humiliation fueling his fury. "You think this is a joke?" he snapped, his hand jerking toward his radio. "Dispatch. I need backup." "Backup for what?" Amani cut in, her voice a whip crack, smooth and unrelenting, his mouth twisted, a snarl forming. For an incooperative suspect. The crowd erupted, a wave of murmurs crashing over them. "This is some bull," someone shouted, biting back the rest. The woman filming stepped forward, her voice bold, unshaken. "Incooperative? You're the only one getting loud." Simmons' ears burned red, but he refused to turn, his focus a laser locked on Amani. He was cornered, a beast backed against a wall, and she could see it, the breaking point glinting in his eyes. Her training kicked in harder, restraint, Discipline. The mantra of a warrior. She could end this now. Dismantle him completely. But she held back, giving him one last thread to cling to. "You don't want to do this," she said, her voice steady, a lifeline he wouldn't take. His nostrils flared, his chest heaving like a bellows. Pride screaming louder than reason. He lunged again, a reckless charge born of desperation, and that was his undoing. In an instant, Amani reacted, her body a symphony of instinct and skill. Her foot shifted, her hands flashed, catching his wrist mid-air and twisting, just enough. Never too much. His own force turned against him. And in a heartbeat, he was spun, his arm bent at an angle that froze him solid. She didn't hurt him, didn't need to, she just held him there. Pinned like a fly in a web. His power stripped bare for all to see. The crowd exploded, shouts, gasps, a raw, chaotic chorus. "Oh, no way." She flipped him. The woman with the phone laughed. Zooming in, her voice a triumphant echo. "I got every damn second." Simmons' breath came in harsh, uneven bursts, his body rigid with shock, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. Amani held him a moment longer, just long enough for the lesson to sink in, then released him. He stumbled forward, arms flailing, a marionette with cut strings. And the cameras caught it all. The street roared with life. A tidal wave of sound crashing over him. His humiliation now a public execution. Etched into every lens, every screen, Amani stood still, her hands relaxed at her sides, her voice cutting through the din like a blade through silk. "Are we done?" He couldn't answer, wouldn't answer. His fists clenched, his entire frame trembling with the wreckage of his ego. Then, a new sound sliced through the chaos. A second patrol car screeched to a halt, its lights flashing like a warning flare. Sergeant William Burke stepped out, his presence a thunderbolt, and the game shifted once more. The Baton Rouge street quaked under a sky now swallowed by dusk. The purple haze deepening into a bruised, restless night. The air thrummed with raw energy. A live wire sparking between the onlookers. Their phones raised like torches in a growing rebellion. Officer Derek Simmons stood exposed, his chest heaving, his face a molten mask of fury and shame. The military ID still clutched in his trembling fist like a lifeline he couldn't let go. Amani Harper faced him, unyielding, her silhouette carved from shadow and steel, her calm a blade poised at his throat. The crowd held its breath, teetering on the edge of uproar. When a new force stormed the scene, a second patrol car screeched to a halt, its lights slashing the darkness like crimson lightning. Sergeant William Burke emerged, his boots hitting the asphalt with the weight of judgment, his sharp blue eyes cutting through the chaos like a hawk descending on prey. He took one look, Simmons, flushed and unraveling, Amani, a fortress of quiet defiance, and exhaled a sharp, weary breath that spoke of battles seen and scars earned. The tension snapped taut, a rope stretched to breaking, as Burke's gaze swept the street, clocking the cameras, the murmurs, the undeniable stench of a power play gone wrong. "What the hell is going on here?" His voice rolled out, low and commanding, a thunderclap demanding answers. Simmons flinched, his jaw working like a machine about to jam, his pride a wounded beast clawing for survival. She resisted, he rasped, his words strained, brittle, a lie stitched together with desperation. Wouldn't comply, got aggressive. The crowd erupted, a jagged chorus of disbelief slicing through his excuse. "That's a damn lie," the young woman filming shouted, her voice a whip crack, her phone steady as a gun barrel. "We all saw it." Burke didn't flinch, didn't turn, but his eyes narrowed, a storm brewing behind them. He wasn't buying the story, not with the evidence blazing in every raised screen. He pivoted to Amani, his posture shifting, respectful but piercing. "Is that what happened?" His question hung heavy, a gavel poised to fall. Amani didn't rush, didn't waver, her voice threading through the chaos like silk over steel. "He stopped me for no reason. Demanded my ID. I gave it to him. Then he accused me of lying about who I am." She paused, letting the weight settle, her words a quiet detonation. "When I refused to let him cuff me for nothing, he reached for me. I stopped him." Each syllable landed like a stone, building a wall of truth Simmons couldn't climb. Burke's gaze dropped to the ID in Simmons' hand, and recognition flashed, a spark igniting a fuse. He stepped closer, peering at the card, and his breath caught, sharp and audible. "Lieutenant Harper," he said, the rank rolling off his tongue like a verdict. Simmons froze, his entire body locking up, the air fleeing his lungs as the crowd's murmurs swelled into a roar. Burke's voice sharpened, cutting deeper. "You're a Navy SEAL." Amani nodded, steady as stone. "Yes, sir." Silence crashed down, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the rustle of the crowd leaning in, phones trembling in their grip. Burke's eyes flicked back to Simmons, cold and unrelenting. "You knew that?" Simmons' fingers twitched, his voice a ghost of itself. Burke didn't wait for the excuse. Didn't need it. He turned to the crowd, his tone a blade unsheathed. "Anyone have footage of this?" Hands shot up, 10, 12, a forest of witnesses wielding their truth. The woman with the phone smirked, a glint of triumph in her eyes. "I got everything." Simmons' breath hitched, a man staring down the barrel of his own ruin. Burke's voice dropped, lethal and final. "Officer Simmons, you're relieved of duty. Effective immediately." Gasps ripped through the air, whispers spiraling into a gale of shock. Simmons' face contorted, a snarl of rage and disbelief twisting his features. "You can't be serious," he barked, his fists clenching, knuckles whitening. Burke's stare was ice, unyielding. "I suggest you stop talking before you make this worse." The warning landed like a guillotine, and Simmons faltered, his defiance crumbling under the weight of his own disgrace. Burke turned to Amani, his posture softening, a soldier recognizing another. "Lieutenant Harper, do you wish to press charges?" The question hung like a storm cloud, crackling with possibility. Simmons went still, his breath shallow, his eyes darting to her in a silent plea he'd never voice. The crowd leaned in, a collective inhale, waiting for her judgment. Amani let the moment stretch, let it press against Simmons like a noose tightening, then exhaled, a slow, deliberate release. "No." A ripple of surprise surged through the onlookers, a low hum of disbelief. Simmons stared, stunned, his mouth slack. Burke studied her, his brow furrowing slightly. "You sure?" She nodded, her voice steady, a quiet force. "I didn't come home looking for a fight. I just wanted to walk in my own neighborhood." The words hit like a hammer, raw and resonant, stripping the moment bare. Burke sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose, weariness seeping into his frame. "Understood. What happens to him now?" he asked, nodding toward Simmons. Amani's gaze didn't waver. "Internal review. Likely suspension. Maybe worse." Her tone was matter-of-fact, a soldier assessing the fallout, not a victor gloating. Burke nodded, accepting the prognosis. She turned to leave, her boots striking the pavement with purpose. But Simmons' voice, quiet, broken, desperate, stopped her cold. "Why?" he rasped, the word trembling in the air. "Why not press charges?" Amani paused, half turning, her eyes locking onto his with a force that pinned him in place. "Because," she said, her voice a low, searing truth, "I already taught you the lesson you needed to learn." And with that, she walked away, her silhouette cutting through the night. A warrior leaving a battlefield she'd already won. Behind her, Simmons stood shattered, his career crumbling to ash. The crowd's eyes burning into him like 1,000 silent judges. The reckoning had come, and he had no one to blame but himself. Night had claimed Baton Rouge, a velvet shroud pierced by the faint glow of streetlights flickering like dying stars. Amani Harper sat alone on the weathered back steps of her father's old house, the wooden planks groaning beneath her, a chorus of ghosts whispering through the cracks. The air hung thick and warm, laced with the sharp tang of cut grass and the distant sizzle of grease popping in a neighbor's skillet, a fragile tether to a world she'd left behind. Her shoulders, squared for battle all day, finally softened, the tension bleeding out of her like a wound slowly closing. Her hands rested on her knees, fingers tracing the frayed seams of her cargo pants, restless shadows dancing in the dim light. She was home, or what was left of it, but the word felt hollow. A riddle she couldn't solve. The screen door creaked behind her, a low wail cutting through the stillness, and Uncle Ray stepped out, his broad frame filling the threshold like a sentinel from another time. Gray streaked his temples, a map of years etched into his weathered face. A man who'd fought his own wars, not with bullets, but with the quiet ferocity of survival. He eased down beside her, the steps shuddering under his weight, and set a bottle of iced tea at her side with a soft clink. a peace offering in a world that offered little. The hiss of his own bottle opening split the silence, a sharp note in the night's uneasy symphony. For a moment, they sat wordless, the hum of crickets and distant voices weaving a fragile truce around them. Ray exhaled through his nose, a sound heavy with knowing, and broke the quiet. "So, you made the news." His voice rumbled low, a gravelly echo of the past. Amani huffed, a dry, jagged chuckle scraping her throat. "Wasn't planning on it." He shook his head, a faint smirk tugging at his lips, shadows playing across his face. "Never are. Trouble hunts us down anyway." She lifted the bottle, rolling the cold glass between her palms, condensation slicking her fingers like tears she wouldn't shed. He wasn't wrong, trouble had found her today. Coiled and venomous, in the shape of a badge and a smirk. She tilted the bottle back, the icy tea rushing down her throat, washing away the dust of the day's fight. Ray watched her, his gaze steady, piercing, a man who saw more than he said. "You handled yourself well, girl," he murmured, his tone threaded with pride, a quiet thunder rolling beneath the words. She nodded, slow and deliberate, the memory of Simmons' crumpled pride flashing behind her eyes. "Did what I had to." His chuckle was soft, warm, a flicker of light in the dark. "Just like your father." The words struck deep, a sudden ache blooming in her chest. Her father's voice echoed in her skull, "Pick your fights. Win the ones that matter," a mantra carved into her bones. She smiled, faint and fleeting, a ghost of the girl she'd been. Ray leaned forward, forearms braced on his knees, the bottle dangling from his fingers like a pendulum ticking down to truth. "Simmons'll feel this for a long time," he said, his voice thoughtful, weighted with the day's wreckage. "But more than that, people saw it. They'll carry it with them." Amani turned the bottle in her hands, the glass catching the faint glow of a distant porch light, a prism of questions she couldn't escape. "Does it ever change anything?" she asked, her voice low, raw, a thread of frustration unraveling. "Or do we just keep fighting the same damn fight, over and over?" The question hung between them, heavy as the night, a storm cloud ready to burst. Ray sighed, rubbing a hand over his beard, the sound rough against the stillness. "You're asking the wrong question, girl." She glanced at him, brow furrowing, the weight of his words pulling her in. He tapped the bottle against his knee, a sharp, deliberate rhythm, his eyes glinting with hard-earned wisdom. "It ain't about changing everything," he said, his voice rising like a tide. "It's about changing something." The words landed like a blow, sharp and true, sinking into her marrow. She let them settle, let them burn, because he was right. She hadn't rewritten the world today, hadn't toppled the systems that gnashed their teeth at her heels. But maybe she'd cracked something open. Maybe some kid in that crowd, eyes wide and heart-pounding, saw her stand tall and realized he didn't have to bow. Maybe an officer somewhere would hesitate next time, haunted by the echo of Simmons' fall. Maybe even Simmons himself, though she doubted it, would choke on the ashes of his own reckoning. Ray nudged her with his elbow, a spark of warmth cutting through the dark. "So what now?" She exhaled, setting the bottle down with a soft thud, the sound a quiet vow. "I keep walking." His grin broke wide, a jagged slash of pride lighting his face. And for a moment, the night felt less heavy. "That's my girl." The real fight wasn't about victory or defeat. It was about standing firm when the ground trembled. About staring into the abyss and refusing to blink. It was about showing up, unbowed, a flame flickering against the wind. Because even if she didn't change everything, she'd change something, and in that small, defiant shift, the world tilted, just enough to feel the weight of what could be. Thank you for accompanying us in today's story. See you again in the next videos. Hello and see you again.